By my watch, Patrice, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to call the roll for this May 10th Utilities Commission meeting. Chairman Randall Tuttle.
Present.
Vice Chair Wesley Curtis. Commissioner Harold Day.
Present.
Commissioner Tom Griffin. Commissioner Yvonne Hines.
Here.
Commissioner Hugh Jernigan.
Present.
Commissioner Dwayne Long. Commissioner Chris Parker.
Present.
Commissioner Donald Stewart. Commissioner Charles Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Alan Younger.
Present.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrice.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Courtney, I'll turn it over to you, I think, for city staff and to go over our agenda, please.
Yes, so before we get started, I will introduce who's on the phone from staff. So as the chairman mentioned, we do have Lee Garrity, the city manager, with us this afternoon. Damon Duquesne, assistant city manager, Patrice Glenn, senior administrative assistant, Mike Corvisto, deputy director, Jan McHarg, assistant director of solid waste, Michael Stover, assistant director of operations, Shane Chu Huffman, capital projects engineer, Todd Lewis, senior civil engineer, Gail Kettler and Kyra Boyd with the communications team, Lisa Saunders, our chief financial officer, Kelly Latham, the deputy finance officer, Gary Bates, our purchasing director, Marilena Jensen-Guthold, assistant city attorney, Kirk Bjorling, real estate administrator, Jakira Westbrook, Office of Business Inclusion and Advancement. And I think, and Heather Curry, budget office. I think that covers everyone from staff that's on the call. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I will share.
Hey, Courtney, excuse me real quickly. I think Mr. Curtis joined. So Patrice, can we make a note of that?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Curtis. How are you?
Good morning, all. Good morning, all. Apologize for being late.
Okay. So we called the roll already, Mr. Curtis.
Okay.
Thanks.
I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, we're gonna have our normal announcements and then go over the water and wastewater updates, our financial updates, then solid waste. Then we'll do a brief overview of the budget presentations that you've seen in the finance committee meetings over the past 2 months, and then agenda items and our CIP update. So I know we talked about this at our last finance meeting, but I just wanted to remind those that, or mention it for those that weren't at that weren't in attendance at that meeting, that Winston-Salem County ranked top 10 in the country. We ranked second among 200 largest cities in the United States. So that was a big accomplishment for us. We ranked high in customer service, and the number of violations that we have were amongst the lowest in the country. I did want to announce that Kyra Boyd will be leaving us. We are very sad to see her go, but I'm really excited about her new career opportunity. She is going to be going to the Winston-Salem Police Department, and she will be their first public information officer. So she's going to be the PIO for PD. And yeah, we wish her well, but she transitions next Monday. So this will be her last meeting with utilities.
Good luck, Kyra.
And then our new office renovations, they are almost complete. We plan to start moving staff back into their new spaces, hopefully next week. So over the next 2 weeks, we'll be moving computers and setting up staff in their new space. 2 things I wanted to mention. There's 2 articles in the Winston-Salem Journal. One was a project that we have going on in Kernersville. It's a rehab project. So it was on the front page of the paper. If you haven't seen it, you can read that. And then there's another article in the journal about cybersecurity where Colonial Pipeline was hacked. And I just want to briefly mention some of the things that we're doing at the city to prevent those type of situations to happen to us. I talked to Tom Kreska this morning, and he gave me a real high-level summary. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that he mentioned. Of course, he did say if anyone has any questions, that they can always feel free to reach out to him. He can discuss further. But we're renewing our cybersecurity insurance. We are working directly with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a division of Homeland Security. We are revamping our employee training programs. We're upgrading our incident response plans. We have engaged a third-party security consultant to perform a security health assessment. And we've gotten a report back, and so they're working on implementing the recommendations. And they're also looking for a managed security service provider. So there's several things that's going on that we're doing, and he's looking at with his team to try to prevent, cybersecurity attacks on city infrastructure. Any questions about that? And then the last thing I'll mention before I turn it over to Mike Stover is, I know I sent an email yesterday evening from Mr. Salzman. There's a project that we have in Kernersville where we relocated, or we abandoned 3 lift stations to build a bigger lift station. And so he's got some concerns with the project. And so I will work with staff to put together a memo to address those concerns. And I will send that out to the Utility Commission members by the end of the week. So you'll have a response to his concerns. Any questions about that? Okay.
This is Alan. I couldn't get to mute fast enough. You may have said this, but was this the email that we received last night that I haven't yet read?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I will send a response. We'll put together a memo with responses to the concerns that I'll send to the commission by the end of the week.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. That, Michael Stover.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, commissioners. As you guys and gals can tell from the Drought Monitor, a lot can change in a small amount of time. It's been a very dry spring. In April, we got just shy of an inch of rain. The southeastern portion of the state is abnormally dry. We're a little behind where we were last year in regards to rainfall totals. Courtney, if you go to the next slide, our water production for the month of April was up from this time last year, about 1.5 million gallons per day. It's about a 4.4% increase. The average rainfall for the past 13 years is a little over 4 inches of rain. So you can tell we're really below average for this month. Water production fiscal year to date, we're tracking slightly behind our 5-year average and where we've been in previous years. Don't know if, what the cause of that is, if it's, COVID related, if it's, weather related or what, but we're keeping a close eye on that. Conveyance dashboard, so far this calendar year since January, we've issued 21 water and sewer permits for a value of $4.6 million. This next graph will show you the breakdown between water and sewer mileage. We've permitted 2.5 miles of water mains this calendar year and 3.1 miles of sewer. Collection system update, there's no change for this month compared to last. We still haven't received the report for January, February, or March yet. So usually we get these reports about the same time as our commission meeting. So I'm assuming we'll get January's report this week or next. Sewer overflows per 100 miles. April was a bad month for us as far as SSOs go. The next chart, you'll see we had 13 SSOs, which ticked us up where we were last year. We're slightly above where we were this time last year. Hopefully we'll finish up the fiscal year real strong and be at or below where we were in 2020. This is our graph of SSOs by cause. One SSO was I&I related. We only received an inch of rain, but most of it was in one single rain event. The other SSO, that was caused by a bypass failure for Piedmont Natural Gas. We had 3 pipe failures, and the remainder SSOs were O&M related. And then lastly, this is our cleaning productivity graph. We're well above our permit requirement of 10% per year. We're slightly below our scheduled cleaning goal of 20% due to staffing shortages on both in-house and contract cleaning crews, but we're trying to close that gap before year end. Any questions on any water or sewer updates? Okay, thank you.
Okay, next, Mike Quavesta will give our financial updates for water and sewer.
All right, thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, Commission members. We'll start by taking a look here at the billed water and wastewater revenues for the current fiscal year, which are still represented by the blue bar, which are $2 million higher through the first 10 months of the year compared to last year, and also above the budget. Overall water consumption is leveled off and is comparable to last year at this time. And we're currently seeing an increase of about $1.8 million in system development fee revenue this year. Moving on to the expenditure side of things, our actual expenditures for the first 10 months of FY21 are slightly higher than FY20, but still tracking under the budget. That's where we anticipate ending up for the year. This slide shows our past due balances since last April, with the blue bar representing the current past due balance total and the orange bar representing the past due balances at the same time the previous year. With these numbers continuing to trend in the right direction, they're down to 4.2 million in April. And the next slide shows the delinquent accounts, which aligns with the delinquent balance amount we've been seeing. These continue to hold steady. We are waiting for information on how many of our customers have been requesting and receiving aid from the city and county rent and utility assistance programs, and we're hoping to hear something about that soon. Any questions on any of this information?
Hey, Mike, it's Chris Parker. To go back to that last slide, so am I seeing that we're having a little bit of a tick up in delinquent accounts?
That's what it looks like. The balances are still going down, but the delinquent accounts have gone up slightly through April.
Oh, well, that's disappointing. I would hope they would continue to go down.
Well, that's what we're hoping to, and that's what we want to get dialed in on where some of this assistance is going and who's been reaching out, and if we need to. We did send out letters to our customers with delinquent accounts to kind of go along with what the city had sent out about the emergency rental assistance program. So we may, based on the information we get back, may have to do a more targeted approach to getting the word out about that assistance.
Okay, so Jan will give our solid waste update.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll start with our usual tonnage updates. So at Haynes Mill Road Landfill, we've taken in 222,851 tons. So we're tracking a little bit under the budget and under last year, as has been the case since the middle of the year. But you'll see in the next slide, we had a strong month in April, not as high as it was in March, where we had an exceptionally high year, but it was still a good month for us. So we're making up some of that lost ground. At the construction and demolition landfill, we took in 34,526 tons or so far this year. It was a good month at that site as well. For the month of April, we took in over 4,700 tons, I think it was. So we are still tracking below the budget and below last year, as we have been all year at that site. So revenues overall for the solid waste programs are at 9.4 million. That's the blue bar on this graph. And so we are tracking below the budget in the overall revenues and below last year as well. And that's largely due to the decreased tonnages that we've been tracking in those other slides. On the expenditure side, our expenditures are right at 6 million through the month of April. That's compared to a budget of about 8 million for this point in the year. So we are below the budget, but we're tracking ahead of where we were last year. A lot of that is due to increased amounts of yard waste that are being processed by our contractor. So that drives those expenses up. And the last thing we want to brief you on, at least in this part of the briefing, is that we've received an offer. It's not a written offer, but we've received an indication from a local developer that they would like to purchase approximately an acre of land. I think it's a little bit more than an acre, not actually surveyed yet, near the entrance to Old Salisbury Road landfill. So on this sketch, you see the curved road there where the cursor is the entrance to the landfill. And the red shaded property, the outlined in red at the corner, is owned by others and is already zoned commercial. So some type of commercial activity is likely to go in on the corner of Freeburg Church and Old Salisbury. So the developer has approached us about buying the land that's outlined in green. And they've offered $150,000 tentatively, and the assessed value is closer to about $15,000. So it's quite a bit above the tax value on the property. So we're not asking for any sort of action on this item, but we wanted to make you aware of this. And certainly if you have any feedback or input, we'd be happy to listen to that as we move forward in the discussions with these people.
So Jan, it seems like we always buy up adjacent properties next to our landfills. Why would we consider selling a potential buffer, especially if they're bringing in a retail restaurant?
Well, you're absolutely right that we're usually in the position of wanting to acquire additional buffer rather than sell land. And I don't know that we necessarily want to recommend the sale. Okay. But we did want to make you aware of it, and it is quite some distance away from the working face of the landfill. It would not have any immediate impact on our operations that we've been able to identify.
Thank you.
And I'll add to that, Chairman, that the area, that area is already developed commercial, and there's some retail and already some restaurants really close in that vicinity. So it would fit into what's already there. And of course, we would want to negotiate for the buyer to put back in some sort of buffer along the entrance and things of that nature. So there would be some conditions of the sale that we would work through.
Thanks.
Right, and I think it's an excellent point to make that the corner lot is already zoned commercial. So it's very likely that some sort of commercial development would go in on that property on the corner, regardless of whether we sold this parcel or not.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any questions about any of the updates that we've discussed so far? We're going to go into our budget presentation, which is a refresher from what we've already discussed with our capital and operations. We'll start with water and sewer first. All right, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. Just as a refresher on where we were last year at this time, when we were going through our budget process, we did reduce over $500,000 from our FY21 operating budget requests. We recommended no rate increase for FY21 due to unknowns with the pandemic. We deferred some capital outlay requests, and then we've also been delaying or reducing the scope of capital projects based on the pandemic impacts. So here's a summary of the FY22 through 27 water and wastewater capital improvement plan that we discussed with the Finance Committee back in March, showing 16 continuing projects with an FY22 requested appropriation of $73,800,000. Turning to the operating budget request, the total proposed expenditures are $98.8 million, which is a 6.59% overall increase. The big driver there on the right side, which is a debt service, is increasing primarily due to an anticipated revenue bond issuance next year, makes up the majority of our increase. On the left side, you can see our personnel and supplies and services. That's what we typically refer to as our operating budget, and that's going up about those combined are going up approximately 3.58%. We'll dig into some of that here shortly. So on the personnel side, they're going up just under 3% and includes a 2% merit increase and 2 new positions for an assistant city attorney and an assistant water treatment plant superintendent. Talk more about those here briefly. Overtime's up about 3%, and benefits are going up primarily due to retirement system contributions. Looking at the new personnel request, the assistant city attorney will provide a utility-specific focus with state and federal regulatory guidance, management oversight of our 13 interlocal agreements, facilitation of vendor contracts and amendments, coordination with the city attorney's office and other legal services as needed. The assistant water treatment plant superintendent will provide water treatment specific regulatory expertise, management support for the division, help provide a succession plan for the water treatment superintendent position. And there's currently a similar position on the wastewater treatment side, and this would provide alignment between the 2 divisions from a management structure perspective. Any questions on that? Okay, turning to the supplies and services side of things, just wanted to show you where we've been in the past here. The blue bar is our budget. The green shaded area is what we've been spending. You can see we've been right on the line. We're tracking to be slightly under budget for 21 as of right now, but did just want to share that history with you as we head into what we're trying to do for FY22. So this slide has a lot going on here, but let's focus on the circle here in the middle for a second. Our supplies and services budget is going up 4.19%. The contracted services on the left side is our largest driver. Much of that was deferred from last year. With the paving contract, we continue to see a high number of repairs for street, sidewalk, and curb cuts related to our work. We've got the first year of the Muddy Creek Power Generation Equipment Service Contract, some other pieces making that up. The indirect cost allocation, the one above that, is going up 4.6%. That's what we pay for city services that are not already charged to our budget. Our rent and utilities are going up primarily due to our move from City Hall to the Stewart Building. We have more square footage across the street. And then really I'd like to touch on the last block on the bottom right, which is our other supplies and services. It includes software licensing for the first years of the WaterSmart portal and the Census AMI software. And those costs are partially offset by a $250,000 reduction for water meters for FY22. Any questions on the supplies and services budget? Okay, moving on to the transfers to other funds. The solid waste transfer is going down slightly, just under 2%, and there's no change for our transfer to the general fund. On the debt service side, I mentioned this earlier, bonded debt increases due to an anticipated revenue bond issuance in FY22. As Lisa mentioned in our finance committee meeting, it is worth noting that our bonded debt payments went down $1 million last year due to refinancing of old debt. State loans are holding pretty steady, going down slightly. And then equipment lease payments are going up just slightly, but that does include the replacement of 19 pieces of equipment, which is on the next slide. So yes, we're replacing 19 pieces of equipment, 11 at field operations and 8 for wastewater treatment. These have all been recommended by the city's fleet department. Total cost of $1.2 million, and with lease payments of $240,000 annually and interest of $66,000. Questions there? Okay. This slide just shows the total expenditure request for FY22 in a summarized version. Any questions on any of the expenditure requests? All right, moving on to the revenue side of things. As you saw in the financial update, our revenues in FY21 are currently tracking ahead of the budget, which helps us out significantly when looking at revenues for FY22. Proposed revenues on the far right are based on where we think we'll be at the end of FY21, and then rates based on the 6-year average for consumption, which gets us an overall projected 3% increase in revenues. Okay, moving on to the rate information and recommendation. So what do we do? What do we take into account when we're setting rates each year? We want to generate sufficient revenues to fund our operating budget, our debt service, meet our debt coverage ratios, maintain appropriate fund balances, protect our bond ratings, recover revenues based on our cost of service, and meet the long-term capital needs of the system. And we have 2 primary charges that we look at annually. The readiness to serve charge, which is also known as the base or fixed charge, is the component of the bill that is determined by the size of the meter. Helps recover our fixed costs, such as meter reading, billing, and customer service, treating and delivering water, and collecting and treating wastewater, and debt, as well as debt service and other capital-related costs. Pardon me. The volumetric charge is the component of the bill that recovers costs based on the volume of service delivered, and we currently have 4 volumetric tiers. So looking at our consumption, which is one of the metrics we use to help set the rates, it's been very consistent over the past 6 years, with FY20 the lowest we've seen in some time, but yet not significantly lower. And so we wanted to use the 6-year average for helping to set our rates for our projected rates for FY22. And we came up with 3 preliminary rate options for FY22. Option 1 was no increases for either water or sewer. We did want to be mindful that many of our customers are still struggling financially from the pandemic. Option 2 would implement a 3.5% readiness to serve and volume rate increase on both water and sewer rates. And then option 3 would implement a 4.5% volume only rate increase on both water and sewer rates. So from the staff perspective, our recommendation was option 2. It provides a revenue increase to bridge the gap as we continue to evaluate the financial impacts of the pandemic. It provides coverage for operations, debt service, and pay-go expenses for FY22. Stability and readiness to serve percentage as related to volumetric charges, and a projected debt coverage ratio of 1.96. The impacts to the customers are residential customers, our light user would see a $2.15 increase bi-monthly, and then our average customer would see a $3.56 increase bi-monthly. And this option was also the recommendation of the Commission's Finance Committee on May 27th. Any questions about any of that related to the rate recommendation?
Harold Day here. I like that option number one. People I've talked to, they're still struggling. You know, our debt is going up a little bit more on collecting money. And I don't know what the rest of the year is going to be, but people I'm associated with, you know, they've told me, please do not go up on the rate. We're struggling just to pay everything we've got to do. And, you know, we're essential utilities to their house. And I just don't think at this time it'd be correct to go up on anything dealing with the water bill. That's what I hear on the street. Thank you.
So there, Harold, thanks for that. Thanks for that. I do think this motion will come from the Finance Committee, and we can discuss if you want to suggest an alternate motion at that time when we vote on it. Does any other commissioner have any thoughts? Mike, I know he's got some more stuff to do, but any other comments or thoughts around option 2 or one of the other options? All right, thanks. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so looking at the impact of this on our debt coverage ratio, you can see that we're currently above a 2. We'll dip just under a 2 next year, and then tick back up with anticipated revenue increases of 5% annually for FY fiscal years 2023 through 25. And we did want to show you all just a current rate comparison. This is based on FY21 rates. So other than Greensboro, we continue to be lower than most of our peers in regard to both the fixed and volumetric customer bill impacts. And even if we implement option 2, we would still remain in the same spot if none of our peers did choose to raise their rates. But our increase, based on conversation that we have had with our peer utilities, is much in line with what they are also anticipating to implement.
This is Charles Wilson. I had a question on the fixed charges.
Yes, sir.
I guess as it relates to the census AMI, we anticipate a reduction in the fixed costs as a result of the census AMI, correct? But then I guess it's a question of when that gets fully implemented and we realize those fixed cost reductions, will we then be looking at a reduction in the fixed charge or a halt to increases in that year over year? I don't know if that was when in future years we might see that.
That's a great question, and that's something that we'll take into account as we look at our cost of service, as it aligns with the timing and the implementation of the AMI project. And while there will be reductions in meter readers and those types of things, fixed costs there, we'll also have ongoing software and network costs that we'll have to address. So we'll be looking at all of that in relation to any changes to the readiness to serve fees moving forward.
Hopefully there's some net savings with it. Yeah. Thanks.
Yes. Any other questions on the operating budget or the rates and rate recommendation? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I will add that. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So we really looked at the rate options and really tried to decide what would be our recommendation. And one of the main reasons that we want to recommend a slight increase this year is to avoid having higher increases in the future. So if we take another year off, you're looking at potentially higher increases in the following years. And so the thought would be you know, slow and steady, just, you know, minimum increases each year. So it's not such a huge impact. Also, as far as the question on the AMI question, Mr. Wilson, I think you might have missed some of our payback analysis. I can't remember if we have done a full presentation since you joined the commission, but
I don't think we have, Courtney. Yeah, I was gonna mention the same thing, Charles. I think Mike and Courtney and team did a really good review of the justification of spending $55 or so million. And so part of it is a payback of saving costs. And so I do think that there's a lot of benefits of the AMI program, but I'm not sure it will quickly enable us to lower our readiness to serve charge. We're still below a target on that. And if you look, the same thing was in the same thing was in the newspaper about 4 or 5 days ago about Duke Energy's readiness to serve, which on a monthly basis is more than ours. So it is just a capacity charge for us to be able to provide all these services before we even get to volumetric. But I do think Charles, there is a good analysis the staff can provide you.
Okay. Thanks.
And thank you for the question.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we switch to solid waste? Okay.
Thank you, Courtney. So we'll start with the CIP, the capital budget, and there's 3 active projects listed on this slide for the 6-year planning window that we look at for the budgeting process. The only project with appropriations in the upcoming year that we're asking for approval on is the mechanically stabilized earthen retaining wall at Haynes Landfill. And we're requesting $449,000 for that project to continue the design and permitting of that project. So total appropriations for FY22 are $449,000, as I mentioned, and over the 6-year planning window, it's $18,347,060. Moving on to the operations budget, the total expenditure budget is proposed at $11,844,350, which is a 2.4% increase over the prior year. And we've got these categories called out: supplies and services, 6.3 million, and we have slides on each one of these categories. Personnel is budgeted at 2.65 million, debt service 1.867, and recycling programs are just under $1 million, $999,000. So beginning with personnel, it's budgeted at 2.65 million, which is a 5.5% increase over the previous year. And this is largely driven by the salaries, full-time salaries, which include a 2% overall merit increase in the pay, and the addition of 1 full-time equivalent position. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. We also are requesting an increase of $16,000 in our overtime budget. In this past year, we've had an increasing workload and decreasing availability of staff due to COVID. We've had more absences and more vacancies than in years past. So we're relying more heavily on overtime and contracted temporary labor. So that's going up $16,000 or 10% of that budget, and benefits are also increasing about 4 1/3%. On this slide, you see the salary for the heavy equipment operator that we're asking to add to our staff at Haynes Mill Road Landfill. It's necessary to maintain our service levels with the increasing workload that we've experienced. And I also wanted to note that we converted an equipment operator position to an administrative role a couple of years ago. So we're really replacing one that we had changed in 2019. So this is the supplies and services breakdown of that, the largest component of our budget. It's $7,322,460, which is an increase of 3.14%. The components of that include other contracted services, that's yard waste processing, scrap tires, engineering services, that type of thing, increasing about 4%. Temporary labor has the single largest percentage increase of 31%. And this is because of what we just mentioned, an increasing reliance on contracted labor to meet our higher workload, as well as a higher per hour rate. We're going to the $15 minimum wage for those workers. Closure accruals, that's the money that we set aside to close the landfill and to maintain it after we close it. That fluctuates with the remaining lives of the landfills. So that's increasing 3.7%. Interdepartmental city department services are increasing at 4.3%. Equipment maintenance, and that would be outsourced equipment maintenance, is increasing just under 2%. So there's a CPI adjustment in most of those contracts. And the household hazardous waste, as Mike mentioned, and electronics recycling contracts are decreasing slightly, just under 1% decrease there. And there's some other miscellaneous decreases that we've requested to offset some of the increases in the budget. So this shows you 6 years of actual expenses for supplies and services and 1 year of projected expenses in FY21. And we've seen a pretty steady increase in our expenditures other than FY20, which was an anomaly because of the last quarter was affected by the pandemic. So we have some lower expenses there. But overall, we are seeing increases in many of our parts, tools, supplies, and services that we need to operate our facilities. So the recycling programs, we usually call these out separately and discuss them since they are funded a little bit differently than some of our other programs and facilities. They're budgeted just under $1 million at $999,030. The drop-off recycling and schools recycling programs are continuing to be funded by Forsyth County in full. So there's a slight increase there of about, I think, a net increase of $18,000 or so. The household hazardous waste contract to operate the 3RC Enviro station is decreasing slightly, less than 2%, it looks like. And electronics recycling or television recycling is decreasing about 9%. So debt service decreases just over 4% to $1.867 million. And it's made up of $1,043,000 in NCMLC equipment replacement costs. There's 3 pieces there. I think we'll list those separately on another slide. That budget decreases about 7% compared to last year. And the outstanding debt service on our bonds is roughly the same, decreases slightly 0.2% to $824,350. These are the 3 pieces of equipment that we're requesting. They're planned replacements, not additions to the fleet. 502 at Haynesville Road Landfill, there's an SUV that's due to be replaced. It was actually due last year, so it's 1 year overdue. The Tarp-O-Matic is the automated tarp deployer that we use at Haynes to cover the waste at the end of the day. And at Old Salisbury Road Landfill, there's an articulated off-road dump truck that needs to be replaced. This slide shows you a summary of all the expense categories that we just talked about. Again, the total budget request is for $11,844,350, which is a 2.4% increase from the previous year, which is the current year. So it might be a good time to pause if anybody has questions before we go to revenues. Okay, revenues are budgeted at $13,211,600, which is a 3% decrease over the current year. This is largely driven by the decrease in tonnage that we're seeing at the landfills. And so tipping fees are decreasing 3.4% accordingly. The intergovernmental revenue is money that we get from the state of North Carolina to fund scrap tire recycling and the solid waste disposal tax proceeds. And we're seeing a trend downward in those amounts too. So 6.4% decrease in that amount. Resource recovery is the money we make from the sale of landfill gas to our on-site contractor and the sale of scrap metal. So we're seeing an increase. There's a tick up there of about 30,000 or over 12% in that amount. And the transfers in from Forsyth County and from the other enterprise funds for the HHW program are roughly the same or increasing slightly at a little less than 1%.
Jan, is the intergovernmental related to the slowdown in tonnage?
I think it is. Yes, I'm sure the solid waste disposal tax proceeds, that's directly related to a decrease statewide in waste that's disposed. So that's related to the pandemic. Now the scrap tire proceed, the money for scrap tire recycling has been trending downward over the last several years. So it's not covered our costs for several years now. But so it also, I'm sorry?
It's not related to tonnage of tires, or is it just an arbitrary number?
Well, it is. It's related to the sale of tires because there's a tax that's applied when you purchase new tires. So it is related. You're right, to the sale of tires. So we've seen an even bigger downward tick last year during the pandemic.
Okay.
The good news is there's I think at least three or four bills in the state legislature right now that's going to revamp our tire program. And if they go through like they're written, we're going to get a lot more money for tires.
That's correct. We were very happy to see that there was some movement in the General Assembly to increase the amount that comes back to local government. So the revenues that we just talked about are based on no change in our fees, our service fees for the upcoming year. As a reminder, the fees are listed there. They range from $32 at the yard waste facilities and $32 for the discount rate at Haynes to $34 for the gate rate at Haynes Landfill. We have updated the cost of service study. We'll talk about that in the next slide, and the cash flow projection that predicts the unrestricted fund balance over the life of the landfill. So this recommendation is supported by those studies. The cost of service study is something we update every year, most every year, and it calculates the full cost of providing our service. It includes not just the operating costs, but the capital, indirects, and debt service, and allocates those costs back over the 11 cost centers that are listed on this table. We don't need to talk about each one, but the overall cost per ton, when you add them all together, based on FY20 costs, is just over $30. So it's $30.21 per ton in FY20. But if you carry that out over, we have pro formas for each one of those 11 cost centers. And if you average them over the life of the landfill, like over the next 20 years, the average life cycle cost brought back to $20 goes up to $34.50 per ton, $34.51. So you have to consider both of those numbers when you look at the rates. But when you see our rates, our waste is coming into the system anywhere from $32 to $34 per ton. It's a pretty good indicator that that your rates are basically where you need them to be. So then you can go to the next slide, Courtney, if you don't mind. Thank you. Then we put these inputs, the rate increase, the rates, the tonnage, all the assumptions that are listed there into the cash flow projection to predict the solid waste fund balance over the life of the landfill. So this is kind of another check on the cost of service study to see how it's going to perform over the life, over a long period of time. So you can see that the unrestricted cash, and this does not include the money that's restricted for closure and post-closure care, but the unrestricted cash ranges from 28.63 million down to 10.5 million roughly. So it stays above 10 million for the life, for the window that we're looking at. So it's a fairly positive picture, I would say. Based on the assumptions that we're making, we update this every year and review these assumptions, and it could be that some of them will prove not to be accurate in the long term. But if we include rate increases beginning next year of $1 every other year, And if our operations costs don't increase more than 2% per year, personnel more than 3%, and if the waste stream grows at 0.96%, and if we get these investment returns at least 2%, this is what the fund balance would be projected at. So I think that's we also are going to show you a comparison of the regional market. This is publicly owned landfills and transfer stations in central North Carolina and the rates that they're charging. So they range from a low of 32 for the South Wake landfill to $41 for Rowan County's out-of-county waste. So you can see that our rates of 34 and 36 are solidly in the low to mid-range of that range. I should point out that different counties have a wide range of funding mechanisms. It's not always apples to apples when you just look at tipping fees, because some local governments charge availability fees and household fees, and they have other revenue coming into their system that we may not have. But it's also interesting to note that the transfer facilities are typically higher than the counties that have chosen to keep their landfills open. So Durham's charging $47.50 and Greensboro $44 to pay for that added cost of transferring the waste out of their cities to a remote landfill. I think that's everything we were going to present, but we'd be happy to discuss further any part of that you would like. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Okay, with that, if there are no other questions about the budget or the proposed budget, they are 2 items on your agenda. We will go ahead and present the other agenda items now.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Item 2 is the one operations item. It's consideration of a resolution authorizing execution of various agreements regarding proposed water and or sanitary sewer improvements to be installed within various developments. This month, we have 6 developer agreements with a total of $656,800 for water and $1,263,000 for sewer. Moving to the finance items with item number 3, which is consideration of a resolution authorizing final settlement of a condemnation action related to the water main improvements project. On May 11, 2020, the commission authorized payment of $1,600 to Charles F. and Barbara S. Carter for 4,352 square feet of permanent water easement related to the water main improvements project. This proposed water line is a recommendation from the 2015 Water Distribution System Master Plan for fire flow improvements in Kernersville. Due to project deadlines, condemnation was filed on July 30th, 2020. The original appraisal was subsequently revised to correctly reflect a highest and best use of the subject property for multifamily development rather than single-family development. This resulted in an increase in the appraised value from $1,600 to $3,450. The Carters have agreed to accept the city's revised appraisal amount of $3,450 as final settlement in the condemnation action. Staff believes the settlement is fair to all parties and is supportive of this resolution and recommends approval. Item 4 is consideration of a resolution approving purchase orders for sole source vendors. Staff is requesting approval of purchase orders to vendors for equipment, supplies, and related repairs and maintenance of products used in utility operations. The products are only available through the authorized distributor or by the manufacturer of the product. These purchase orders will cover the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, and be awarded to each vendor as needed. The amounts that that you've seen in the attachment there are the estimated annual spending based on historical spending data, and we would only put through purchase orders when those items or those amounts are needed. I think you've all seen this many times, but when we do this once a year, we did want to just basically remind you that these recommendations are based upon provisions of North Carolina general statutes, which provide that the formal bid requirements do not apply to purchases of apparatus, supplies, materials, or equipment when Number one, performance or price competition for a product are not available. Two, a needed product is available from only one source of supply. Or three, when standardization or compatibility is the overriding consideration. Staff recommends approval. Questions on the sole source item?
Hey, Mike, it's Chris Parker. Just for the greater knowledge of the other commissioners who may not completely understand how this works, when you get to item number 6, can you maybe explain, based on item number 4, kind of the implications of what we're having to do with item number 6?
Yes, sir.
So that might help kind of explain this.
We can do that. It gives it good context. Yes, sir. Okay, item number 5 is consideration of a resolution awarding a contract for custodial and floor care services at water and wastewater treatment facilities. The water and wastewater treatment divisions need to contract custodial and floor care services at the treatment facilities. Request for proposals was issued for these services with 5 proposals received. A panel of city staff reviewed the proposals and recommends awarding a contract for these services to American Facility Services, Inc. in the estimated annual amount of $68,322.64. Contract may be extended for as many as 2 additional 12-month periods for a potential estimated contract value of $204,967.92. Staff recommends approval. Okay, item 6 is consideration of a resolution authorizing sole source equipment procurement from 10 Carbon Machinery Company for the Archie Elledge wastewater treatment plant. The Archie Elledge wastewater treatment plant return activated sludge system is equipped with 5 low lift brand pumps. These pumps are sold and serviced regionally by 10 Carbon Machinery Company. Staff is seeking to procure a replacement pump and a spare pump for this critical application. Staff requested quotes from 10 Carva and received a quote of $63,644 to provide a replacement and a spare pump. The city manager approved an emergency order to purchase the replacement pump, and staff is seeking commission approval to purchase the spare unit for $31,822. And to Commissioner Parker's question and point earlier, 10 Carva was on our sole source list for the current year, or is on the sole source list for our current year, but at an amount of only $30,000. So anything over $30,000 has to be brought before the governing board. And so this is an item that if we had $65,000 on there for 10 Carva, we would not be bringing this item for these 2 pumps before you today. It would just have been captured in our sole source purchase order request from item 4.
Okay, so now, Mike, you've confused me because I'm looking at last year's list and it was $60,000 for 10 Carva.
Was it 60? Okay, sorry. 60,000. I'm sorry, Mr. Parker.
Okay,
so it was the 63,000. I apologize. I meant to say 60,000 for 10 Carva. The 63 was over the amount that we had. I apologize. The $30,000 threshold is typically what we bring, what we have to bring to the commission. And we put other items on there that are lower than 30,000, just so you'll have visibility about some of the things that we are purchasing to try to be as transparent as possible. But so 10 Carva was on there for 60,000 for the current year. The 2 pumps were over 63. And so that's why we're bringing this item. If it had been 65, you would not have had to have seen it. So apologies for the confusion.
Okay, so in this incoming budget, which is item number 4, we bumped up 10 Carva to 200,000. So based upon that, we're expecting almost 3 times as much pump purchases.
The thinking there, and Mike Stover, jump in if I'm incorrect, was that we would need to replace several of those other pumps there for that machinery at the return activated sludge system. Those may end up needing to be replaced in the upcoming fiscal year.
So I guess a lot of this has to do with Mike Stover going over the budget. So as we look at this, I'm looking at, for this projections right now for 2021, the total estimated spend is almost $5.3 million. And back in 2020, it was about 4.4 million. And back in 2019, it was about 4.1 million. But as I look at those numbers, and even going back to item number 4, where we're doing a total spend estimate of 5.3 million, that does not mean we're spending all of that. That just means that as Mike Stover and his crew went through here, that's kind of what their projections are. So they don't have to come to the commission with a bunch of different items for all these sole source providers. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And I know this may be a huge accounting thing, and I'm not going to ask for it if it is, but maybe Mike Stover knows off the top of his head, how close are we getting to these estimates?
I do not know that number off the top of my head. It would take some significant accounting work to go back and figure that out, but we can certainly do that if you wish.
No, I'm not asking for that. I'm just saying if you kind of had a thumbnail idea on it.
I do not. I know for a fact we're not probably coming anywhere close to, $5.3 million. But we're just, there's several items on that list. I don't think we added that many new items, but we went back and evaluated a lot of the ones that were on the list over previous years due to item number 6, because we can't predict when things fail, and when they do, we would like to try to get them replaced in a timely fashion rather than waiting for commission approval. So.
Yeah, and that's understandable, especially with a pump. And I imagine, we not only need a pump, but we need a backup pump as well for when that one fails. But these estimates, like this 5.3 million, does that roll up into our overall budget?
So, Mike, you want me to address that?
Yeah, if you like to.
Okay, so Mr. Parker, a lot of those are taken into account with our supplies and services budgets in the various divisions, and then some of them are, if they're larger pieces of equipment, some of them will be purchased out of our capital projects related to those facilities. But we do try to account for most of those within our operating budget or our capital budget if we have visibility about the purchases prior to the upcoming fiscal year.
But Chris, yes, everything they spend rolls up into our financials and in our budget. So they've got this amount budgeted, and for prior year, it's on the expense item side of our financial reports.
Okay. That was a yes or no question. So thank you, Randall.
Oops. Okay, any other questions on items 6 or number 4? Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is consideration of a resolution approving the FY 2021-22 solid waste operations and capital improvement budgets and requesting adoption by the City Council. Jan did an excellent detailed presentation related to this item. Just ask if there are any additional questions at this time. Okay. Item 8 is consideration of a resolution approving the FY 2021 and FY 22 water and wastewater operations and capital improvement budgets and requesting adoption by the City Council. I did a much less excellent presentation related to this item, but we'll ask if there are any additional questions also at this time. If not, that wraps up the agenda. I'll turn it back over to Courtney.
Okay.
And Courtney, are we ready?
The chairman.
All right, thanks. That's what I figured. So we have 8 agenda items. Are there any commission members that would like to pull an agenda item and not consider it in a consent agenda motion?
Harold Day, I'd like to pull that one about the rate increase on the water bills.
That would be number 8.
I think that's it.
Okay. Any other commission members?
So Harold, you're okay with number 7. We don't need to pull that one.
I think that's correct. I just think that option number 1 is one we need to go with for our consumers for the time being. Everybody I'm talking to, they're struggling with everything they got, and we don't need to go on the water bill right now when we're making it okay on our budgets. We're below budget. So I just think it's not justifiable to raise water rates at this time. That's my opinion.
Okay, so let's discuss that in a second, if you don't mind. So hearing that, and then I just we'll knock out the other items first, Harold. I would entertain a motion, the consent agenda motion for approval of items 1 through 7.
I move approval on items 1 through 7. Chris Parker.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on any of the agenda items 1 through 7? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Curtis.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Hines. Ms. Hines, okay, there we go. And Courtney, maybe we don't need to screen share anymore.
Okay.
Mr. Jernigan.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
I believe Mr. Stewart is not with us. Is that correct? I want to make sure he hadn't joined. Okay. Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
And Mr. Younger.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. So, Mr. Parker, you're chair of the Finance Committee. Why don't you suggest or talk to Mr. Day, or you would like me to? Mr. Day, do you want to present another motion, or how would you like to handle it, Mr. Day?
Well, I'd like to make a motion. We maintain the water billing as we have it at the present time, being we're under budget on most items, and discuss it later on to maybe next year. But right now, I just think we need to hold the line. Our people are not paying rent, and the uncollected water bills went up a little bit this last time, according to the graph we had. And I think that's going to be this unemployment money is going to run out soon for everybody. And the government's not going to be there anymore, and there's going to be more of them can't pay what we're billing. I just think we need to hold the line, being we're maintaining our cost. So am I hearing you say that you want to make a motion to have a 0% readiness to serve and 0% volumetric rate increase? That's correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Any second? I do not hear a second. So I don't think that motion can be made.
It won't fly, will it?
So
the motion fails.
That motion fails. Thank you, Patrice. I didn't know the right way to say that.
Oh, Mighty Lennon, but thanks.
Oh, I was going to say, I didn't say that, but it did fail.
Okay, thank you. So now, Mr. Parker, I presume we will go with the motion as written in agenda item number 8.
Thank you, Chairman. So the Finance Council puts forth a motion for agenda item number 8 that we do have a rate increase of 3.5 on both ready to serve and volumetric increases for this upcoming fiscal year.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on this motion?
I do. So
okay.
I just want to say that I guess the reason I'm voting this way on this motion, I certainly feel where Harold's coming from, I guess, in his thoughts about where people are. But I think I also I'm kind of sympathetic to the idea that at some point we will have to have increases. Right. And it's kind of better to kind of slowly present that out, even though it may be a little tougher, $1 or $2 now to kind of get there. I just think I agree with the Finance Committee's thoughts of just kind of slowly moving this thing in that direction. So as opposed to having a bigger jump later on. I realize too, we are under our budget, but that can quickly change. I mean, as kind of things come forth in the future. So that's kind of why I'm voting in that direction.
Any other comments from commissioners?
And Wesley, I'd say you articulated my thought process as well.
Mine as well.
I also wanted to say I had empathy for what Harold was saying, but during our budget meetings, I'm looking at a little bit of inconvenience, maybe by just a little bit of increase, as opposed to potentially damaging the system in the future by not having increases. So it's like the betterment of the whole. So that's kind of what swayed me. Thank you.
If I can make a comment along Hugh's lines, when I joined the commission, David Neal was the chair, and he made a comment I'll never forget. He said, "You never want to get behind. You'll never catch up." And so I agree with what Hugh said about maintaining this pace, steady as it is, that it benefits what we're doing.
Dwayne, I'm sure David Neal will be honored that you remembered his wise words.
I remember.
I think it's worth noting, even with this increase, we're still quite low relative to most of our peer utilities.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Griffin.
No, I was answering the phone.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to vote? Mr. Younger, aye or nay?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
Mr. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan?
Yes.
Ms. Hines?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
No.
Mr. Curtis?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you so much. Courtney, anything else from staff before I ask for commission members?
Well, we do have our CIP update slides real quick.
Oh, cool. That's right. Sorry, I'll turn it back over to you. I forgot. Chang?
All right. See if I can get it to. All right, Chang.
Oh, thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all had a good weekend. The first project is Kernersville Sewer Rehab Project. We've spent around 22% of the total contract amount so far, and we've rehabbed 10 streets, and we have another 8 that should be done within the next 30 days.
Are you free tonight and tomorrow night?
Here is the progress map. The red is the work that we have left to do. The green is are all the streets that we've completed so far. Roswell Lift Station. This project is also it's almost complete. 97% of the sewer line has been installed. The lift station startup is in progress currently.
Shane, a question. This is the one that we got the email on.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that the blasting was done by a subcontractor. Do you know that?
Not off the top of my head, but I could.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
That's fine. Thank you.
So Roswell Lift Station, yeah, we're almost done.
No.
So what I'm hearing is that we shouldn't hear any more blasting.
Oh, we have completed all the blasting. The very last one was done last month.
Okay.
Mr. Griffin, I don't know if you were on the call when we talked about this earlier, but we are preparing a memo in response to the email that you received, and I'll be sending that out to the commission by the end of the week.
Okay. Thank you.
So here you can see the progress map. Just a very little bit of red is left on La Plata Drive. And here you can see a picture of the new landscape, the bushes that's been placed around the lift station itself. North Mill Creek, we are making good progress on this project now. The 36-inch line from Shadowlawn Drive to Hayes Mill Road has been completed. We've shortened the 42-inch bypass line. since we installed the new pipe from Rinalda to Midkiff, and the new pipe is now in operation. And here we can see the progress map. We've made good progress, which is all the green you see at the very bottom. Linda Circle, and then Scott Hine Park Drive is the green at the top. Here is a picture of the project corridor that's been partially restored. It's from Midkiff looking upstream. And here's another view of it. It's the partially restored project corridor, but this time looking from the Midkiff construction entrance looking downstream. Are there any questions for me? Thank you very much.
Thanks, well done.
Yeah, Chairman, I do have just a couple other announcements before we adjourn. Just as a reminder, we do have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with our contractor for the Muddy Creek project. This is MWH is the contractor, and they're giving a presentation. So we discussed this maybe a couple of meetings ago, that we would plan on a closed session meeting in June to update you on how that presentation went.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have any updates on the ARPA money?
Yeah, actually, I just got an email from Ben. It appears, good afternoon, Chairman, members of the commission. My apologies, especially you, Mr. Day. He was staring me down there and give a greeting. I haven't even had a chance to read it because I was doing other things while all of you were talking. So Treasury just put out their guidance on how to spend the money. So what the city's been doing, and I think Courtney briefed this previously, is there's an executive committee, a steering committee, and there's a task force that's working on compiling all of the opportunities to spend the ARPA money that's coming down. And so we'll take this guidance that literally was received just moments ago, and we'll apply that to the long list of things. The city did hold a public input session a week or two ago, and we're still receiving input from the public. And that's basically where we're at. So there should be an action coming soon for the city council to appropriate the first tranche of funds. That's 50% of the 55 million that's coming to the city. It'll appropriate the funds to the budget, but it won't be dedicated to anything in particular. And then 12 months later is when the second tranche will come in. So I'll certainly have more to report next month on where we are and as far as project vetting, et cetera.
Okay, so that's from the Winston-Salem side. Do we have any updates from the Forsyth County side?
I do not. I'm assuming that they received the same information that we did from Treasury, but I haven't spoken to my counterparts regarding that recently.
Damon, are you getting good response from people about, what they'd like to use it for? Is it?
Yeah, we heard everything from pancakes to pickleball. To be honest with you, at the public input session, the manager's laughing because we started off with pancakes, and I say that tongue in cheek, right? The pancakes was due to fundraisers that couldn't be held, where they actually sell pancakes, and that's how they fund their generosity throughout the year. And then we had a lovely lady who closed it out, who described all the benefits of pickleball to certain, populations, and they were actually very legit things. But and so yes, there have been lots of ideas, economic development thoughts, and job creation programs to develop the workforce. A lot of focus on underserved communities. yeah, there's the list is long, and it's going to be quite a task for city staff and governing boards to decide who gets what and how much.
Damon, I got a question. You might think, is the utilities going to apply for some of that money to pay for this overtime we had and people out on the COVID this past year? Are we
eligible? Maybe. Again, we just have to put it all together and let those three committees sort of vet those things out based on a priority. And like I said, we just got the guidance from Treasury, so we'll have to balance what's even eligible at that point. So I don't really have a great answer for you, Mr. Day, on that at this point.
Mr. Day and others, I'll add that I'm on the subcommittee with Kelly Latham and Patrice Toney, who's the budget director. And one of our first tasks is to look at reduction in revenues. So we're looking at, reductions in all funds across the entire city. So we're pulling those numbers together. And like Damon said, we've really been waiting on, and Lisa Saunders has been saying this as well, we're just really waiting on Treasury guidance to even see what we can do, which it sounds like we've gotten today. So we'll know a lot more going forward.
Okay.
Thank you, Damon. Damon, think transformational.
Yes, sir.
Any commission members have anything to bring before the commission?
Is it my time to make a motion?
I was going to invite Mr. Garrity. Would you like to share any thoughts, or actually, let me say that you should definitely come back next time when we're serving food. This is, you picked a bad meeting to visit.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission. Yeah, I know. I'd rather have food. Plus, I like to see old Tom Griffin's face up and close, and not just on Zoom. But anyway, no, I appreciate you all the work you're doing. Damon said he's going to double your salary next month. But Courtney is right.
Damon said what?
He's doubling your salary. 0 times 0, right?
Well, that's it.
Courtney's right about the guidance. We just got it. I mean, an hour ago, and there's a fact sheet, but the details that they just put out are 100 pages long. So we're going to try first to deal with lost revenues and kind of set that aside, before because literally every day there's another request. And they're all good requests, but we all have to decide, what are the highest priorities for what we do after we just restore revenue. So stay tuned. I think I've been encouraging my county colleague to use some of his money as well for the utility commission. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Day.
Yes, is it my time?
It is your time.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn this great meeting.
Second, Wesley Curtis.
We have a motion and a second, and this, we're usually right up on time. This is one of the first times we've been early. Okay, so we have to have a roll call motion on this. I don't make the rules. Mr. Curtis.
Yes.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Ms. Hines.
Yes.
Mr. Jernigan.
Yes.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
And Mr. Younger.
Yes.
Thank you all to the commission and to the staff for a great meeting. Congrats, staff, on both solid waste and wastewater budget. A lot of work went into that, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
I wish you all have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.